Good afternoon. My name is Marla McGuinness, and I will be your moderator for today's announcement. Joining us today are the Honourable Tim Houston, Premier of the Province of Nova Scotia, and the Honourable John Lohr, Minister responsible for Nova Scotia's Emergency Management Office. I'll turn it over now to Premier Houston for his announcement. Go ahead, Premier.
Thank you, Marla. Good afternoon, everyone. First off, our hearts go out to the family of Larry Smith. This is an unimaginable time for our province, and I cannot imagine the additional pain that you are enduring right now. We're well into the recovery mode from the damage caused by Fiona. The main priorities are, of course, power restoration, wellness checks, and getting people back into their homes. There are lots of people who can't reach one another by phone or because of impassable roads. So as safely as possible, please check on your friends and your neighbors. If there is anyone you're worried about that you haven't heard from, please let local authorities know. In terms of power restoration, approximately 181,000 Nova Scotians are still without power. Some have been displaced from their homes, others have significant damage. And far too many have fallen trees lining their yards, or in some cases on top of their homes. Yesterday, I was joined by my colleagues, Minister Lohr, Minister of Emergency Management Office, and Kim Maslin, Minister of Public Works, to survey damage across the province. We went to CBRM, where we were joined by some of our local Cape Breton MLAs, including Deputy Premier and Minister of Finance, Alan McMaster, Minister of Addictions and Mental Health, Brian Comer, and the MLA for Glace Bay Dominion, John White. We toured some of the hardest hit areas of the province, including Glace Bay. I've never seen anything like it. Over the last few days, I have been out with public works teams, with power utility crews in other areas, including Pictou County. And I will tell you that no matter where I was, on the drive into communities, we were stopped by downed trees. This was the scene everywhere. We saw homes and visited with their owners who had trees collapsed on their roofs. One business we saw literally blew away and blew into the residents behind it, taking the back off the home. The devastation that we've seen in Glace Bay and the other communities it's unimaginable. All the while, power poles are down throughout, and some just completely snapped in half. The stress of the question on everyone's mind of when is our power coming back was palpable in the voices and the eyes of everyone we met along the way. To see the damage firsthand showed me that we need to act, and we need to act immediately. And to hear directly from those impacted the hardest helped show me some of the measures that we need to take. Nova Scotians need help. They need it now more than ever. And in the coming days and weeks, insurance will be helpful for those who have coverage. Disaster relief funding from the federal government will be helpful for some uninsured losses, but we know this may take time and there will be gaps. So we want to do our best to get help to those who need it the most as soon as possible. I fundamentally believe that the role of government is to be there for Nova Scotians when they need help the most. And I can't not think of a more appropriate time for government intervention and to be there to help Nova Scotians. That's why I want to outline for Nova Scotians some of the immediate and longer term supports that their government will be offering to them, to those most affected by the storm. So today we're announcing a suite of unprecedented funding programs to support Nova Scotians. There may be changes in the coming days as we get more information, but this is kind of where we're at right now. Disaster relief assistance funding. This program will cover certain uninsured losses up to $200,000, and there will be no deductible for both residents and small business owners. This program is now open, and individuals can apply online at novascotia.ca, or obviously appreciating that many Nova Scotians don't have access to the internet right now. Applications will also be available at MLA offices. The amount an individual receives depends on the damage, and it depends on their insurance coverage. Please check with your insurance carrier first. We're also announcing $100 for every household that lost power for at least 48 hours due to Fiona to help cover the costs of spoiled food. We know some will have insurance to cover this, but it is often not worthwhile to make a claim as a result of significant deductibles. This help will be available by the end of the week with applications online or at the MLA's offices or Department of Community Services offices. Aside from power outages, the biggest issue appears to be downed trees and damage caused by trees. Most of this damage will likely be covered by insurance or federal disaster relief, but there is a gap where no other funding supports are there specifically for tree removal. Therefore, we will provide $250 to every household having to pay for tree or debris removal from their property related to Fiona. This will be available by the end of the week, and the application process will be the same as that for the spoiled food claims. For Nova Scotians who have been ordered out of their residence, we have issued $500,000 to the Red Cross, who will issue emergency funding in the amount of $1,000 to individuals and families who have been displaced. This funding will be available by applying through the Red Cross. Nova Scotians were prepared for 72 hours without power. That's what we were asked them to do, and many were, but many weren't ready for the extended issues that we're seeing past 72 hours. And don't have the food and supplies are harder to come by. We have some fantastic community groups helping their neighbors. They need resources right now to continue those efforts. That's why we're providing $100,000 to both the Salvation Army and Red Cross operations in Cape Breton. Additionally, we're providing $500,000 to Feed Nova Scotia and $150,000 to non-member food banks in Cape Breton and Eastern Nova Scotia. We also know that seniors, particularly those in some of our most rural communities, have been hit the hardest, and they're struggling. So in addition to our power loss and tree clearing effort, we're offering an additional $250 on top of the $750 previously existing seniors care grant to help seniors with storm reparations. To access this funding, seniors simply apply for additional support through the same existing channels. And I think, in short, if you've received the seniors grants already, this additional funding will come automatically. If you've never received the seniors care grant, we ask you to apply through those channels. An incredible amount of Nova Scotians are in shelters right now. Over 200 CBRM residents alone have been displaced from their homes. Shelters need our support. We're providing $100,000 to shelters in Cape Breton and Eastern Nova Scotia to account for some of this extra demand. We're also establishing a $100,000 hotel fund administered by Cape Breton Community Housing to help people in shelters who can't go back into their homes and need additional temporary accommodation. When students are able to get back into school, we know all situations will not be equal for all children. In order to provide access to some extra support for food for children and their families through the school system, the Schools Plus program will receive $150,000 to distribute support to families most in need. This support will come in the form of grocery store cards and access to food where possible. We know that those on income assistance may be facing additional challenges right now. As a result, the Department of Community Services will be issuing a one-time emergency support for income assistance clients in the amount of $150 per case. This is meant to help with food, formula, damages caused by flooding to furniture or personal items as a result of power outages. One item that was clear across the province was that our community centers need our support. Now should be the time to rely on them for sources of comfort for their communities. Unfortunately, too few have generators to help keep the lights on and the heat on. I'm happy to announce that as a longer-term measure, our government will be establishing a $200 million fund that will, a $2 million fund. Our government will be establishing a $2 million fund that will be available to community centers to help them with the costs of purchasing and installing generators. Details of this program will be released over the coming weeks. It's hard to give a total cost estimate right now, not having the full picture of how many trees are down and the damage, full picture of the damage, but our best estimate is that the costs of these programs, the programs that we've just discussed today, will be over $40 million. And I know this won't make everyone whole, and I know it won't be as fast as some people need. But I've seen the impact, and I know the importance of getting this in your hands as quickly as possible, and our government will do whatever it takes to make that happen. It is our job to be there for you, and I have made that a very personal commitment. I've made a very personal commitment not to let the province down in this time of need. Many of you are asking about schools. This is an evolving situation with power, but tomorrow classes will remain canceled in the Strait, the Chignecto Central, and the Halifax school zones. Classes in the Cape Breton Victoria Regional Centre for Education will remain canceled for the remainder of the week. CSAP classes will also be canceled in those areas. I do want to end on a positive note that gave me a lot of hope for the future of this province. Well, in the CBRM yesterday, we got word of some CBU students doing something pretty incredible. In the north end of Sydney, where there's no power, a group of international students saw the need to help. They got together, pooled their resources, and started making food over a fire, the only resource available to them. Word got around, and hundreds of hungry students without power showed up for help, and every single one of them was fed. The line went on for hours. I was so overwhelmed by the kindness of these students, welcoming in strangers and feeding them in their hour of need. Thank you for going above and beyond. You've done your community and our province very proud. That is the Nova Scotia way. That is the Blue Noser way. We have a lot of work to do to recover from this storm, but I assure you, your government is committed. The frontline workers that are out, the crews that are on the ground are committed, and we will get through this. We'll just take patience. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Premier. We'll now take questions from reporters using the one question, one follow-up format. We do have a very limited amount of time today and a number of reporters on the line, so we'll do our best to get to everyone, but I do apologize if we do not make it to you. We'll start first with Jonathan McGuinness with CTV. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Hi, Mr. Premier. Thank you so much for your time today. Other than the funding for generators for community centers, how can the province prepare itself for future storms? We hear that these are going to be happening more frequently with greater severity. How do we prepare going forward?
Thank you, Jonathan, and that's a question that will certainly get a lot of attention over the coming weeks. Of course, today our main priority is on immediate power restoration, making sure that people are safely housed and really just those wellness checks, so we know the full extent of the situation today. But in terms of the longer term, obviously the program to support those community centers is really important. We know that there's a lot around the province that just couldn't help, but wanted to help, and a generator would go a long way. So I think that's an important program. But certainly coming out of this, there's a lot of discussion, and Minister Laura has been involved in a lot of these discussions, both the communications. Just making sure that people are able to communicate in an efficient way through the cell phone network, through the texting, through other ways. So that will be certainly an ongoing discussion. But for today, as I said off the top, the suite of supports that we're announcing today is pretty unprecedented. It comes from what Minister Laura has seen directly and heard from communities. It comes from what I've seen and heard directly, and we believe it'll help a lot of people. We also understand that it might not be perfect, and what I want Nova Scotians to know is that this will evolve. We will do everything we can to support you in this time of need. We'll be there as much as we possibly can, and I know our colleagues at the municipal and federal levels also feel the same. So I appreciate the question, Jonathan, but the specific question will be a longer term discussion.
Jonathan, do you have a follow-up question?
I do, yeah. Mr. Premier, you're announcing $100 to help replace lost food. Given the cost of food these days, how far is that going to go? And are you possibly open to increasing that should that need be required later on?
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, I just want to stress that for a lot of people, food spoilage would be covered under their insurance policy. But we understand that, there'll be there'll be some people who have insurance, but maybe don't have other damage, and just making a claim alone for food, wouldn't go above their deductible, or just wouldn't make sense. So what we're trying to do today is just acknowledge that gap, acknowledge that people all across this province have had tremendous food spoilage because of the power outages, and put something forward from the government. I think this is a new program. I don't think this has happened in this province before. So we'll start there. But again, if the response dictates that we need to make a change to it, I want to assure Nova Scotians that we're definitely open to that.
Next, we'll go to Keith Doucette with the Canadian Press. Go ahead, Keith.
Good afternoon, Premier, Minister. Premier, I know, as you stated, it's fairly early, but I'm still wondering whether you have a sense of the economic hit that the province has taken overall as a result of the story. Can you characterize it in any way? I know that you can't give a number, but what's your feeling on that?
So thank you, Keith. I'll answer. The real answer is no, we don't know. We're hearing from businesses even today about their generators failing, or businesses that don't have generators that have a lot to lose. So we know overall for the businesses around the province and for the people of the province, it's just very difficult at this moment to give a number. And I'm sure at some time in the future we'll have one, but it's significant.
Keith, do you have a follow-up question?
I think just on that, Keith, I think what would be fair to say is the breadth of this storm, the damage of this storm it certainly is a historical storm across the province. So our expectation is that the cost of previous storms, this will be more.
And as a follow-up, given that you've had this suite of help announcements today, I'm wondering if the same, once you have a better idea of what's happened to, say, farming, fishing, that kind of thing, might there be something similar in line for various businesses?
So there's, in some of the cases, the farming losses and then other losses are insurable losses. So we would expect those companies and businesses to have their insurance. Certainly, if we're going beyond that to things that are uninsurable, we've announced the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, which is for those uninsurable losses. So those are businesses like agriculture and fisheries are eligible for those programs that we have announced today. So we really don't have a sense of how deep that will go or what the amount of the applications will be, but that we'll know that in time. And sometimes businesses themselves don't know right away what the extent of their costs are either. So, but in the fullness of time, we will know those numbers. But it is significant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next, we'll go to CBC's Paul Withers. Go ahead, Paul.
Hi, just a quick question on the program that you've announced. Is it first come, first serve, and does the money run out if there's a big uptick in demand? No,
it's not. The intention is that these programs are available for everyone who applies and qualifies. It's not. This is not you don't have to race your neighbor and get the claim in before your neighbor. I mean, the intention is that these are there to support everyone who's in need.
Paul, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. I want to take you to the telcos and the persistent complaints that we're hearing, and no doubt you're hearing across the province with the failure of internet service and cell phones. It's generally like to be passed over to the feds. This is a federal government responsibility. I'm not sure that I care on planet Earth which government department's responsible, which level. My question to you, though, as the Premier, is Ottawa doing enough to ensure that the telcos are providing the best possible service in this particular case, especially as we all know storms like this are going to become more serious?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and I do want to acknowledge that the federal government has certainly been very accessible to. I've spoke to the Prime Minister, Minister Laura spoke to his colleagues. I've heard directly from a number of federal ministers. So I do want to say that they've been, very responsive on a number of issues in terms of the immediate situation we're in. In terms of the bigger question you're asking, I think the communications issues that we've all experienced have had a huge impact on, just the mental health of people who are trying to reach a loved one. They've had operational issues for crews that are out trying to, get on with the recovery. So the impacts they're not an inconvenience. They're very real. What I would say is there will be a discussion about how we regulate, oversee, and make sure that the services are there for Nova Scotians. So are they doing enough? I think there's always more that can be done, and we definitely want to be part of that discussion.
Thank you for your time.
Next, we'll go to Ian Nathanson with the Cape Breton Post. Go ahead, Ian.
Hey, if you hear a grocery store in the background, that's where I'm coming from right now, but just for connectivity. To the Premier and the Minister, also recognizing the priorities for getting power back and also doing the restoration project for clearing trees, but getting also to the telco situation. Has there been any discussion about any particular rebates from them as well? Just again, given the connectivity issues that everybody's running into.
Thank you very much for this. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I'm just checking with Minister Laura to see if he had any more recent information. I'm not aware of those discussions taking place. I was aware that many of the providers had kind of waived extra data fees and tried to make some concessions, but I'm not aware of any rebates at this time. That's not to say that they're not considering it or that it might not happen, but I'm just not aware of those discussions right now.
And do you have a follow-up question?
Apart from the CBRM, what's sort of the severity, the similar severities with the rest of the province?
Well, certainly what we've witnessed in the CBRM and in particular Glace Bay was pretty heartbreaking. I mean, had a chance to speak to some of the residents there, and those are emotional discussions. Certainly, it's devastating. Minister Laura was in Antigonish area today, and I think I'll allow him to speak to that. But certainly, in my experience around Pictou County the last couple of days, there's a lot of damage. So I think all through eastern Nova Scotia, but certainly in the areas that I've seen, there's a lot of damage. You want to speak to Antigonish?
So yeah, I saw damage in Antigonish close to the level of damage in Glace Bay, so it was pretty severe, and it's really, kind of strange because we know that Richmond County, Port Hawkesbury, Inverness were not hit as hard for whatever reason. Antigonish and Pictou County and even Truro were hit quite hard, and I mean there was damage in the Annapolis Valley where I live too. From about the middle of the Annapolis Valley west, it really wasn't impacted by the storm, but we're talking about a pretty huge part of the province if we're taking Kings County east right across the province being hit with the severity increasing right across the province. So this has caused a lot of damage right across the whole province.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have today. I apologize to the reporters we didn't get to. Thank you, Premier and Minister, for your time today, and continue to stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, Marla. Thanks, everyone.
Stay safe.